Hi, my name is Ashton Marcus. I'm with KUCI 88.9 FM in Irvine, and I'm here with...
David Lamoureux. I'm currently the musical director for Musical Theater West's production of West Side Story.
Great, okay. One question I got to ask you was, first of all, do you know that La Mirada right now has a world premiere musical they're starting to do? They have an orchestra and a gigantic cast, plus also another large theater, 3D Theatrics. They're playing a Disney favorite, with with a live orchestra and a huge cast. Does that affect you in regards to your talent pool that you can draw from?
You know what? That's a really interesting question. I think that is something that a lot of theaters face in casting around here, and certainly both of those other theaters are theaters that I, have worked with and have good relationships with, and it's a very supportive community. I think that, more often than not, it winds up kind of sorting out that the talent pools required for different shows are, come with enough diversity that the talent pool is wide enough to accommodate. But certainly, especially when it comes to, shows with a lot, large dance ensemble or something like that, especially like West Side Story, going into the audition process, absolutely I'd be lying if I said I wasn't really concerned about what our turnout would be. However, I will say that during the West Side Story audition process, just nothing but pleasant surprise after pleasant surprise. The pool we had to cast from was just an embarrassment of riches. Like, our options were very abundant, and I'm like, the cast we wound up with, I really can't imagine working with a better group of people for this project.
Yeah, great. Okay. Actually, that's another question I have for you. I am really impressed with the casting, with actually the musical talent that Music Theater West has. So I have a question for you. What do you look for in your casting anyway?
Well, casting West Side Story is different than some other shows in the same way I guess you could say casting any show is an individual experience. But for this show in particular, something that was important to me, because this material is dealing with, some very real-world issues that are still very present in today's society and our culture. And additionally, the roles are meant to be, kids. I mean, they're late teens at most, and these street gangs, and like to really capture that, it was important to me, to find a cast that was age appropriate and wasn't much older and just trying to pass off playing younger, so that the reality of it would hit an audience a little more viscerally, but also that we got a cast, a young cast that sang like they were speaking. Their speaking voices and the intention behind like how they approach the text in the scene work. I wanted to make sure that every time we hit a song, we didn't have a cast that was switching into this very, musical theater, more classical, more legit sound, and then kind of in turn betraying this storytelling that, we're establishing with the scene work and with the grittiness of this particular interpretation of the show. So I think that we've really found a group that kind of perfectly finds this balance of having beautifully, trained and equipped voices that can sing this Leonard Bernstein score and give it justice for the people who are coming to hear these melodies and these songs that are such a definitive part of both the classical repertoire and the musical theater repertoire, and I mean really just the American music repertoire, but also to have such truth in the character and in each individual storytelling throughout their show. No one is sacrificing any element of their character in favor of having a prettier sounding note, I guess is a way to kind of summarize it. And I'm really happy to have a cast, of great singers who is willing to do that for the sake of the piece.
So great. Now, artistically, what drew you to actually do this this particular piece, to actually choose to be able to do a West Side Story?
Everyone wants to do West Side Story. I think anyone who says they don't want to do West Side Story is lying or is mistaken somehow. It's a bucket list piece. It's a piece that has aged exquisitely and is still as relevant and as intricate and studyable and musically satisfying today as it was, I think, when it first premiered in front of audiences in the 50s. Additionally, knowing Musical Theater West's capabilities and my experiences with them in the past, and their willingness specifically to put a lot of focus in, making their orchestras large and representative of what the composers originally intended, as opposed to cutting it down to its smallest serviceable size for budget. We've prepped essentially since it was announced, and planned so that we could make sure that when West Side Story hit, whenever it hit with Musical Theater West, that it would be the 30-piece orchestration that it was intended to be played as, that we would do it with a full cast. So knowing that this West Side Story was going to be complete and not truncated and not stripped down in any way, this is, as far as I perceive it, something that very well could be a once-in-a-lifetime experience. I get to stand in front of a 32-person cast and a 30-piece orchestra for the next 3 weeks, conducting, to me, what I think is some of the greatest music ever written. It would have been impossible to say no. Been in another country and had to come back to do it.
Okay, great. And another question about casting. About your musicians, what do you look for in casting your musicians?
Casting the musicians. Well, the musicians for West Side Story are contracted through an organization that I also actually work with called Los Angeles Musicians Collective, who also hires the musicians for 3D theatricals and some other theaters around town and a variety of other projects, both putting musicians together for bands or putting musicians together for recording sessions or whatever it may be. It was a very careful selection process. We went through a database of, essentially a database of upwards of 700 musicians, and, our relationships with a lot of these players individually, and knowing that in the same way that I'm passionate about this show, that I've been waiting for this opportunity, that the cast is passionate about the show, that they've been waiting for this opportunity. Musicians, the idea of coming in to play West Side Story with a 30-piece orchestra, with the full orchestration, and not going in and knowing that, well, I'm going to play this orchestration with 10 people or with 15 people, and we're going to be missing half of the sounds that are supposed to be happening at this moment in the show. It's hugely appealing, and I think that it's in the same way for me, like bucket list for a lot of players. So being able to have that level of enthusiasm in the room, knowing that, everyone, we're all coming to work, but we're all coming to work on something that we care deeply about and that we are very motivated by. This music makes me want to be better at what I do. It makes me want to be better at articulating to a cast and to an orchestra and to an audience, why this music's important, why we should still be doing this, why it's crucial to have full live orchestras and shows of this scope happening to be able to retain, some of the truth of why this show and musical theater during this time period were so important, because I just think it's still incredibly valid. So the musician selection process was very involved, but I'm thrilled with how it's turned out. It's 30 really incredible musicians playing in that pit, and tremendous thanks to everyone with Los Angeles Musicians Collective who helped us put that together.
Good. Actually, the reason I ask you that is usually for music directors, I usually ask them that question, and usually they tell me things like they hire their friends or people they've worked with, people they know, and then I always say, that's so incredibly unfair, because as a musician, that means you can't get a job unless you know someone.
You are absolutely right about that. That's a big hurdle for musicians, I think, in this community, and also just in the, a lot of people who are in the position of having to hire musicians aren't necessarily people who know a lot of musicians. There's a lot of musical directors who are, who come from a performing world or, come from a accompanist world, and they're a pianist, and, then they're very equipped to teach the vocals and clean the vocals on a show, but it gets to a point where it's put a band together, and, they don't know hundreds of musicians, so you're kind of forced to just go to anyone who plays, and I think that's how the hiring of friends and just kind of finding a list of people and going to them every single time just because of the availability and someone who plays that instrument. I think that had become par for the course. So I know, with how the musicians are hired at Musical Theater West, at 3D, at any of these other theaters that we work with, every single show, I mean, we get the orchestration and the score, and we look through the books and we look through our databases and our notes on all these players. So we're really, working to make sure that the people with the right skill sets for the parts, some shows, there's loud, brassy, big band content, and some shows there's, it's all lush and classical chamber music, and, the right player for one is not necessarily the right player for another, but any of these players of this quality control that make it into these pits, like, they're going to be right for, there's something that they're right for, there's something that they have strength in, that, they should be playing projects that play to their strengths.
Okay, then one last question that I have for you. Again, I haven't even seen this yet because, again, this is a preview. If some of my audience members decide to go see this show, what could they expect to see?
What you can expect from Musical Theater WestSide Story is a version of this show that is still important and is still meaningful and doesn't phone in a single moment through the show. From the beginning of this show till the curtain comes down, there's something very inspiring and easy to instantly connect to about watching a stage that is full of non-jaded, very committed, very driven, very intelligent performers delivering some of the best content that's been written in this country for this art form. And then to have that supported in addition by 30 people under the stage just making some of the most bombastic, glorious orchestral sound that's happened in this space, I'm confident of. That's just something that I would so encourage you to avoid missing, because I think this is a specific kind of lightning in a bottle moment that is not going to be duplicated for a long time. Like, this is a very special, a very specific, a very once-in-a-lifetime West Side Story.
Okay, well, I look forward, because I always look forward to seeing your shows. They're fantastic, at least the last few that I've seen. All right, so, well, thank you very much for being on the show.
Absolutely. Thanks so much. I appreciate it.
West Side Story will be playing at Musical Theater West from February the 12th to the 28th. For more information, go to www.musical.org.